All right, good deal. Let's talk. This next topic or section is going to be about renting out properties here. We're going to cover a couple of different things here. So this is going to be this is a practical training here to screen tenants, property care, and just basically sound rental finances in general.
Yeah, I mean, with the tip of the week, we're just going to go through kind of the basics with it, make sure that you guys understand. It's important that we understand some of the basics with this so that we don't make any mistakes. Before as we get into the criteria, it's important to make sure that the person is qualified. We're looking for tenants that are going to be good tenants. So usually we're going to want to make sure that they make, at least 2.5 to 3 times their rent. So if the rent is $2,000 a month, they need to probably make nearly $6,000 to be able to make sure that they can afford the rent. We also want to have some type of credit minimum. That way, we're having tenants that have a history of paying. They don't need to be an 800 credit score, but if they have a good history of paying, then this is going to probably be somebody who is going to continue paying. We look for references, look in things like into their evictions. And so the application process is a very important step in us determining who's going to be the best tenant and who's going to work right, especially if we're going to be renting it out and being kind of the landlord ourselves versus using, a property management company.
Yeah, well, and who we picking or choosing as tenants, can have a lot to do with what kind of a renting experience we're going to have. You pick the right tenant, you can have a very easygoing experience there where rent just basically gets paid. And if you make the wrong choice, it can turn into a bit of a nightmare. And so, yeah, I think the more careful we can be here about selecting people, the tenants, I think all of that. Anytime you spend time researching and putting some effort into uh, checking out tenants before you rent out, I think is money and time well spent. And because again, a good strong renter can stay in the same place for years in many cases, and can be very hassle free, whereas a bad renter can be just the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. So go ahead and go back there real quick. So as far as there's certain things that, as far as fair housing is concerned, that we need to make sure that we protect, or that we don't disqualify them from, I guess I should say. So we're looking at income, we're looking at credit, but what we can't do is we can't judge somebody on their race, their color, their national origin, their religion, sex, family status, disability. So as we're interviewing these individuals, we need to make sure that we're looking at the documents and what our standards are, and not disqualify anyone because of any of those reasons. And then also make sure that we have a strong lease set up with everything that's going to be involved as well. So not only do we have the application, but this is how the lease is going to be, so that you have everything ready when you do find that right tenant.
I mean, I think this basically kind of covers what Steve just talked about here in terms of things that, I guess, fair housing practice here, and not excluding certain groups. I think you pretty much already covered it here. So you can't ask about things related to race, marital status, disability, gender, or source of income.
Yeah, yeah,
It's kind of funny that you can't ask about their source of income, but you can ask them about their income.
yeah. You can ask about their income and and really looking for past references, calling and speaking with, past landlords. That's going to give you a good clue. If they've had good history of it, then they should probably be a good tenant. As far as the property itself, we need to make sure that everything's up to date. We don't want to, get any complaints or have any problems. So if we are renting, we want to make sure that the heat, the water, electricity, everything is working properly and up to code, so that we don't get in any type of trouble that way.
Well, and if we are working through a property management company, then it's going to be important that we're doing our research on a property management company, so we can make sure that we're getting a company that does a good job with this kind of stuff. Because uh, again, if they're the ones that are going to handle it here, then hopefully, they can keep your property in decent shape. But we wouldn't want to have a property management company that basically was ignoring these issues but collecting money every month, on it. And so, we would want to make sure we're picking the right property management company. We're doing some check into how they're rated, other customers that maybe use their service, and some of the things that they do and provide for us, just to help protect your property if you're using it. If you're renting the property out yourself, then it's a little bit easier to keep an eye on it and to be able to service things or do things that the property needs. But if you're not, if this is an out-of-state property for you and you need a property management company to do it, then it's going to be more important in who you pick as a property management company to make sure that they handle this stuff and do it well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We also want to make sure that we upkeep the property. Looking at protecting our assets. So, checking any things like the roof, making sure that the heating and air conditioning is updated at least once a year. We want to put aside between 1 to 2% of the property's value each year to improve and upkeep the property. It's going to be worth it to put back some of that rental income into the property to keep it in good shape and not have any type of damage that can be done over a long period of time. So, it's better to make sure that the heating and air conditioning gets fixed every single year, checked up, than when there's a serious problem and now it's going to cost you a lot more money than just sending out and making sure that it's serviced correctly.
Yeah, I think general regular maintenance there can prevent expensive repairs, at least in a lot of cases. Some things can't be avoided, but in many cases, regular maintenance will help prevent it. Now, roughly 8.5% of rent payments arrive late nationwide. And so basically a clear policy and the right tools can help cut the delinquency here by 30 to 50%. For yeah, things like having a delinquent policy there that's in place that they understand is one of those things that can help avoid it. But yeah, that's almost 10% of monthly rent payments. Again, one of those things that comes back to the tenants that you're renting to, and being selective about that, can save you a lot of time here and hassle, yeah, with things like late rent payments. But yeah, the better you can spell this stuff out, the due dates, the grace period, what the fees are, the better off you're going to be. You can also make it a little bit better by making it easier for tenants to pay. So this is doing things like being able to pay online or through ACH or auto pay. That the easier you can make it for renters to pay, the easier it's going to be for you to get your money. And there's so many different ways we can do this today. There's just no reason really not to. Um, other things like keeping a separate operating account so you can track things like your income and your expenses on the property. That's probably a good idea, and something you can reconcile monthly, for taxes and for Schedule E.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So a lot of this can be done online. We want to make sure that we've set a date, we have a grace period, and then some type of penalty if they are late. So kind
And
of the, oh, go
oh, go
ahead.
ahead.
No, I was just going to say, kind of the key takeaways is that we want to document everything. We want to be prepared beforehand. So if this is your first rental, we're going to want to make sure that we've got the right, lease set up, that we have the right processes in place so that we can weed out applicants and really try to find the best applicant. We really, if we're looking to be, a landlord, we want to have long-term tenants. That's going to make your job easier and it's going to save you a lot of money in the long run. So if you have somebody that may live there for, 2 or 3 years versus 1 year, they may be the renter to go with. If as long as they have good history and everything, that way you're actually going to be making money because you're not going to have time where it's going to be sitting vacant trying to refill it.
Yeah, really, most of these things though are pretty simple, and they're common sense things that any landlord can do in terms of just recording things here, treating people the same, and trying to keep the property up to date. And the better you've been about maintaining the property, the easier it's going to be to rent out. If you basically have a property that hasn't had any maintenance for 25 years, and then you suddenly start renting it out, it's going to have all kinds of issues that are going to come up in that first year or two of rental because again, been deferring maintenance on it here for a long time, and eventually all those things are going to come due. And so, yeah, the more on top of it you can be with regular maintenance here on the property and getting things done, the easier it's going to make things long term for you. But everything else we can pretty well automate here, for things like collecting payments, uh, yeah, even property management itself. There's a lot of options for that today as well. For those of you, if you live outside the area, or if it's just something you don't want to spend the time to do, property management companies can be a good option, especially for investors. They're not paying full market for properties. Property management can be a great idea. It's harder for people that they're paying full market price to be able to afford, something like a property management company, and not lose money on the property every month. But that's fortunately not generally a problem for us because we can usually get properties at pretty good prices. So that's always an option.